Hello, and thank you for coming to the SDM Foundation YouTube channel for another video. Today, we're going to be talking all about one of our very favorite things, passwords, and why they're important, how to keep track of them in various ways, and maybe some tips and tricks about how to create your passwords, as well as, what is good practice for security. With that being said, why don't we talk about why passwords are so important these days? So, for starters, passwords are your way to associate a username, like we have here, example, chase.com, which is, a banking website. And to log in to this banking website, you need a username and a password. This is generally how accessing any sort of account you can imagine having works now. Accessing your bank account has always been similar to this. Going to the ATM and entering your PIN, verifying who you are when you're going to a bank teller in person, and that concept has translated to more than just banks, but to access all sorts of information and or various items that you own or that are in your name under a username you created. And to access each of those accounts, you will have a unique password for that username, which is the account owner, you. I know that is a little bit convoluted, but essentially, if you have an account for something, you have a username and a password. That's the simplest way to think about it. And if you want to be able to access your account, whether it's for your wireless and cell phone plans, whether it's for your Amazon account, banking accounts, emails, uh, accounts for work, school, anything. You will have a username and a password. Some other examples be like for office.com or anywhere where you need to have your identity known while using Microsoft products. When you're buying something from Amazon, if you want to have a record of your purchases, if you have Amazon Prime and you want to access the free shipping, things like that. One thing we can talk about by going through the process of creating an Amazon account here, we'll just make a random name here. This brings up something that I wasn't planning on mentioning until a little bit later in the video. But since it popped up, we can go over it now. Right here is a pop-up that is because I'm using my web browser, the way I'm accessing these websites, the browser Chrome, which is a Google product, Google Chrome. So it is offering to save this suggested password as the password for this new Amazon account that I'm creating. it's saying that I won't have to remember it because it will be associated with my Google account. So as long as I can access my Google account, then I will have access to this password. Um, this is something that I will, go into a little bit more detail on shortly. But the idea there is that you have one account that is the master account that has control over the passwords to all your other accounts, and ideally, you don't have to worry about remembering any password beyond the one to the master account, and making sure that that one is extra secure and has all sorts of ways for you to authenticate who you are and verify that it is your account, just in case you do forget the password. Another thing we'll talk about shortly. But first, let's talk about some basic rules for making passwords. So right here, we do not exactly have the best example of password requirements, but that is what you want to pay attention to on every website, is what is required for the password. Because if you use a password that doesn't meet the requirements, then you will not be able to use it. You simply will not be able to have what you wanted as the password. Even though the parameters are low, we are going to go with a more secure parameter or set of rules for the password we're going to create because it is more common and more secure. More and more websites are requiring passwords of this level of security, so that's what we're going to do. So it would be a strong password. This would definitely be a very strong password because it has both letters, special characters, numbers, as well as uppercase and lowercase letters. So there is a lot of variation on what characters could be entered in however many characters you use. In this case, the least amount would be 6, which would leave for a lot of variation if you were to use, that many different types of characters. And we are also going to use Google Docs over here to pretend we're entering the password because we cannot show the password like you can in some websites where we'll have a little check mark here that says show password or checkbox, or maybe an eye that you can click on and off that will reveal what you're typing instead of just having the black dots. There are a few tips and tricks that are useful when creating a password, especially a password that is going to contain the type of characters that we need, such as uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. One thing to do would be to have a special character as a letter in your password. Right? In this example, quack22, I'm using the @ symbol as an A to spell the word quack so that I can meet the requirements but not have to remember something that's seemingly arbitrary. Another example of that would be to use 5s as S's, 0 as an O, and there we have password. We can add a little exclamation to it, and you can think of that in your head that way, like password, like you're yelling it. small tricks like that. One thing that I find to be very useful for an overall approach to passwords is to do something along the lines of having, let's say, a base password. So let's say we call it base, and then, we'll use one of or two of the ways to represent letters with other characters. So we have a special character, uppercase and lowercase letters, as well as numbers, and right now it just says base pass. And so this would fulfill the requirements for a lot of websites at the moment, because usually instead of 6 characters, it's 8. It can be less, sometimes it can be more. And obviously, as long as you meet the minimum character, and it doesn't say that there's a limit, then you can have as many as you want. You don't want to go too overboard, but um, to continue on the example of having sort of a base password or a base to build your passwords off of, this is what we're going to use for the base, and then we can add something to represent each account or each website, Amazon, Microsoft, Chase, anywhere, so that you can always have this base password in mind, and then just apply the signifier for each account to it. So, for example, you just do something simple like this: Chase, Microsoft, Amazon. Or if those are all a little bit too much, AMA, Micro, CHCC, Chase credit card, you know, things like that. Or if you know that you are going to keep a list of your passwords, like in a document, which you can store safely somewhere on, your computer or your phone, or if you wanted to write it down, anything like that. That is a trick in and of itself, but also if you are writing the accounts next to them, if you're not using this clear of a signifier to make the account obvious, then you could just simply number them, right? So in that case, these would all just be letting us know what the account is, and we would have a username. So an email doesn't always have to be an email either. Sometimes it could just be something that's a username. And with this example, we would just number our base password, going down the line and making sure that we know which account it is by either checking the list, by guessing, or eventually remembering as you get used to this system of keeping track of your passwords. And even though I just touched on it lightly, obviously anytime you make a password, you should add it to somewhere where you store those passwords, whether it be like we have here, a word processing document, a piece of paper, um, and a note on your phone, anything like that. It's a good idea to keep track of them on your own, um, and to keep it updated anytime you do change your password. This way, you know you have something to fall back on. You can even do multiple of those, and you should then feel pretty safe about not having to get stuck where you don't know your password and can't get into an account and might lose access to it. Also, it is typically good practice to change your password, every so often, maybe more often or more frequently, based on how sensitive the nature of the account is. Maybe something like uh, a silly T-shirt you bought once that made you use an account or create an account to buy it versus your bank account. Maybe change one of those bank account more frequently than the other one. But it is generally a good idea to change your passwords every so often. And with all that being said, what if you don't have control over your passwords right now? Or what if you don't have them neatly organized, you don't have a list, and some of these practices are things that you'd like to implement and you're feeling a little overwhelmed? Well, the first thing you'd want to do is to go about getting passwords for all the different accounts that you have. And some examples would be, email accounts, Gmail, Comcast, Verizon, Yahoo, Hotmail, social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, uh, financial accounts, banks, investments, paying bills like electric, phone, gas, any other online bills that you might pay, cell phone bills, shopping accounts, Amazon, eBay, any specific stores like Sears, Macy's, that T-shirt store that I just made up a moment ago, your Apple ID, uh, travel accounts such as with specific airlines, hotels, Airbnb account, EasyPass, Uber and Lyft accounts. If you have subscriptions to newspapers or magazines or their online versions, the Globe, the Times, medical accounts, doctors, hospitals, insurance, and obviously any government accounts, which we all experienced as being pushed towards digital over the past couple of years. Um, and once you have an idea of all of those accounts, you want to make sure that you can access all of them and then keep track of the correct password as you go about accessing each of these accounts. And then you can start right then and there with a new and secure and backed up set of passwords for all your accounts. You can put a date on it and remember to change it, update it every so often. And even though it might be a painful day with a daunting task, it will make things much easier on you after the fact. And then something that you can do that is very much like that is to use a password organizer such as Google, trying to suggest and then save my password and tie it to my Google account. So that is similar to things like LastPass, which essentially does the same thing. You log in to LastPass, and then that will keep track of all of your passwords after you spend a day putting all of your accounts into LastPass, which would require basically the same process I just described of finding all of your accounts and then making sure that you can log into them. The way that it works with Google is that as you use your web browser, Google Chrome here, and other web browsers do the same thing, and this also applies to iPhones or on Androids when it asks you if you want to save the password. That means that an account is keeping track of what password was just entered for the other account, making one account at least in a sense a bit of a master account or higher than it in like a power structure in terms of access. So like on an iPhone, your Apple ID will potentially have passwords that you have saved while entering apps and things like that on your phone, or by searching or by logging into places on any web browsers you might use on the phone, then it's a little bit of a mix between the web browser and the phone manufacturer, Apple, being in control of the password. But it is a good thing to know which one it is and to try and be clear when reading those pop-ups about who you are saving this password with or what account you are saving it with, whether it's Google, Apple, or putting it into something like LastPass. Although that won't be as much a pop-up type thing, but it still applies to the same idea of knowing where your passwords are and who or what account has control over them. And with that in mind, also a good idea to mention two-factor authentication, which is all of the text codes that get sent to your phone that allow you to get into your account. That is an example of two-factor authentication. Basically, a factor beyond your password to be able to verify that you are indeed the correct owner of the account. A secondary email, phone number, which is why those text codes come through. Something like Touch ID or facial recognition with phones. And let's get into what I was originally about to jump into, which is passwords being managed by Google under my Google account, right? So I'm logged into my account and sync is on, meaning that anytime I'm logged into my account on any device, these same settings, such as the passwords, will remain. So here it shows a list of my usernames as well as the websites, and then the passwords hidden with the dots. And then here is the show password button, which I referenced earlier. And then in this case, it is a little eye icon that once you toggle it on or off, it changes. And one way to access this would be to enter the PIN or some other factor of authentication to verify who you are to see the password. This is how any sort of password manager works, in the sense that you have to at least be able to prove, or not just password manager, but also two-factor authentication works. Is basically if you are able to prove that you are in fact the correct user that is associated with the account by some means that was set up in the process of making the account, or after you've made it, you go back in the settings and add another factor of authentication or change your security settings. And in this case, if I enter my PIN, it then shows us our password to the website. And since I just had to enter the PIN to get into my computer, because that's what I'm currently making this video on, that brings us to a good question about the security of using something like this, right? Well, the security of this is as secure as your device is. So if other people are able to access this computer, say if that was a shared PIN, then this would not be that secure of a place to have it been signed into my Google account and leaving it up for others to be able to access it and having sync on or syncing with this device. So it really comes down to the device that you're on. If you like the idea of having your passwords managed or saved for you, but you don't want to have to remember a password to get into your phone, then that sort of makes it a bit problematic, because you could have all of your passwords saved nice and neatly on your phone and easily reachable, but if you don't have any security for your phone, that means if anybody were to take it or if you were to lose it, then they would not only have your phone, they would also have access to all of your accounts. So any sort of software or account that is going to store information about other accounts so that you can log into them is only as secure as the devices that are able to give you that information. The other level of security, or the other aspect of security surrounding this, would be the security of uh, companies such as Google Chrome or Apple, and um, uh, having their data breached, and you being involved in um, a leak of that nature. But you have to remember that these companies, since it's their business to do things like this, they're actively combating all of those types of attacks on a regular basis, and they also have ways to let you know if you have compromised passwords, such as right here, to check your passwords to see if you're involved in any data breaches. And thankfully, I don't have any compromised passwords from this small list, so that's good news for me. Another feature that is tied to giving one account sort of an overarching power over other accounts is logging in with an account. So I know that Zoom works this way. Okay. So right here we have the ability to log in with the Zoom account, which means enter an email address or username and a password and sign in. Or we have the ability to sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, meaning that I can use either one of those accounts as a way to either access my Zoom account, which will be tied to and associated with the one that I signed in with, whether it be Google or Facebook, or on your phone, it could be Apple. If you choose to sign in with Apple, you can sign in with Amazon. There are various different accounts that you can use this type of feature with. And the safety of it sort of goes back to what I was just saying about the level of safety of the device you're using it on, as well as the safety about the safety of the company. So if it's some company you've never heard of that seems a little sketchy, that's offering to take care of your passwords or log you in different places, maybe that's not something you'd want to do. Or if a company you don't trust is an option to do this for something that you definitely don't trust this company with, then don't do that. It's just an option and a way to sort of ease the burden of keeping track of so many different accounts.